Hi there. So I'm on page 47 in the red book today, and we're going to be talking about solving for y and graphing. So page 47 starts with number 7, which I'm going to rewrite so that you can see. It's x plus y equals -4. Now, usually we have our graphs in the form y equals mx plus b, where the y is all by itself on one side, and then we have the slope next to the x and the y-intercept out to the side. The problems that you see today are not going to be in the form y equals mx plus b, but you have to get them to that form. Okay, so we need to solve for y, and we need to get y all by itself. If you remember back from the beginning of the year, we did a lot of solving equations where we had to get the variable all by itself. You're going to be doing the same thing in these problems, but you want to just get the y all by itself. Okay, so I'm going to write that up here. Get the y by itself. That's the goal for all of the problems. So if we look at number 7, in order to get the y by itself, we have to get rid of the x. And we have to do the opposite to get rid of something. So we just have an x, and to get rid of an x, we just minus x. If we minus x from one side, we have to minus x from the other side. So that leaves us with y equals -4 minus x. Okay, now remember that in our form, we like to write the x first and then the b. You don't have to write it like that. This way, this is okay too. But just remember that the slope is always right next to the x. So this number right here, this invisible -1, that's our slope because it's right next to the x. And this -4, that's our y-intercept. If you would prefer to write it in this order, y equals mx plus b, you can go ahead and do that. You're just going to leave the y, and then you put your slope and your x first, and then you put your y after that. Okay, so you can go ahead and write it either way. Either way will be correct on your test. So then you have to graph it. After you solve for y, we got the y all by itself. Remember, we graph the y-intercept first. So the y-intercept always crosses on this y-axis. So we go to -4 on the y-axis. And then we have to write our slope as a fraction. So since our slope is -1, to turn it into a fraction, we just put a 1 on the bottom. That tells us that we go down 1 on the y-axis and to the right 1 on the x-axis. And so we started our y-intercept, remember, that's our starting point. So I went down 1 and over 1, and I put a dot, and then I can draw my line. Now this line has a negative slope. If this line has a negative slope, our number in front of the x also has to be negative. They have to be matching. So since this is negative and this is negative, we know we've probably done the right line. Okay, let's look at number 9. So on number 9, again, we want to get the y all by itself. So if you remember our party problems, the y is like the host. That's the one we want to get all by itself. And the thing right next to the y is the BFF. So that's our -4. And this 3x over here to the side, this is the acquaintance. Now who leaves the party first? The acquaintance leaves first. So we are going to do the opposite of 3x, which is just subtract 3x. What we do to one side, we have to do the other side. And this cancels. Now some students look at this 3x and they say, wait a minute, a 3 right next to an x, that means multiply, so I should divide. But we want to get rid of both the 3 and the x because we want the 3, the x, and the -4 to go away. Since we want both the 3 and the x to go away, we don't have to separate them. We don't have to divide them. We just take the whole thing and we move it over here to the other side. So now we have -4y left on the left side of the equation, and we have a -12 minus 3x. Remember, we cannot combine negative 12 and negative 3 because those are not like terms. They don't both have x's, so we just leave them as they are. Okay, now we have a negative 4 and a y. And the negative 4 and the y, we do want to split up. We want to take the negative 4 and put it on this side, but we want to leave the y on this side. So since we're splitting them apart and the y will stay on one side and the negative 4 will go to the other side, that's why we divide on this one. Okay, we have to divide every number on the other side by negative 4. So that leaves us with y equals negative 12 divided by negative 4 is 3. And then we have our slope after that. And we want to keep slope as a fraction. We always put slope as a fraction. And guess what? It's already in a fraction for us because we divided. So we do have to simplify. The numbers we don't have to simplify on this one. 3/4 is the smallest it gets. But a negative 3 divided by a negative 4 is going to turn into a positive. So that's going to be plus 3/4 x. Okay, again, if you want to write the x first, you can go ahead and do that. It would be 3/4 x plus 3. And I'm not going to graph this one for you. If you need help with graphing, you should go to the Canvas page on December 1st, and there are 2 videos to help you with graphing. Okay, but you will need to graph this on your assignment. Okay, so I'm just going to do one more problem for you. I'm going to do number 12. So on number 12, we want the y all by itself. So to get the y by itself, we have to first get rid of this 1. So we do the opposite. We subtract on both sides. And that leaves us with negative y equals negative 1. Now remember, this negative in front of the y really tells us that it's negative 1y. So there's a negative 1 right next to a y, which means multiply. And we want to split those apart. We don't want the negative 1 to be there. So to split them apart, we do the opposite. We divide by negative 1 on both sides. So we have y equals 1. Now remember, if your equation is y equals 1 and there's no x, that means the slope is 0 because there is 0x in our equation, so your slope is going to be 0. So we just go to the y-intercept, which shows us here y-intercept is 1, and then we're going to have a 0 slope. Okay, just as a quick reminder, if you have x equals 1, this tells you that the x-intercept is 1, and you're going to have an undefined slope. So instead of going to the y to put your 1 like we did up here, so we went to the y-axis to put our 1, on this one we're going to go to the x-axis and put our 1, and then our line for this one would go straight up and down. So there's your line for that one, and this is your line for that one.